Are you guys all right to begin there in KZN?
Yeah, we're fine. Either we got audio, we don't have visual.
Let's just see who's there with you guys. Could you just maybe tell us?
Okay, so it's Rod Stretch, 102, 103, sorry.
Sorry?
Myrna and Barry Herders, 402.
Hello, Myrna.
Hi, Clifford.
All
right, this is my okay.
And Karen and Tony from 101.
Hello, Karen. Welcome.
Awesome.
Okay, is Warren there?
Yeah, Warren's here, 503.
Okay, excellent. Is Jerry there? I know Jerry was coming.
Yeah, we are.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so let's start, ladies and gentlemen, because it doesn't have to take up our whole Sunday. Thank you all for being here, and this is great. This is the first time we're having a second owners meeting in the course of the year, and welcome. I want to just very, very quickly go through the agenda and ask you if there's anything you want added onto the agenda. It has been circulated in a number of different forms a couple of times. But before we go through the agenda, can I just ask, does anybody have apologies on behalf of anybody else who wanted to attend but couldn't attend for the meeting? I did get a couple of messages to say people might come in a little later and also might only be able to attend for about a half an hour or so, which is fine. This is an informal session rather than, it's not a special general meeting. There are no urgent or pressing decisions that need to be made. It's a discussion. So please feel free to leave when you have to leave. And we just hope you can make a contribution. In KZN, if you just press your microphone your microphone is on, Steve, so that's great. But Rod, for example, if you want to talk, just unmute your microphone, and then when you finish talking, just remute it. So let's try get through the agenda as much as we can and as quickly as possible. So we haven't received any apologies. Moving on to the agenda itself, I'll just quickly take you through the items on the agenda, and please feel free to just indicate if you want to add items. But basically, we're simply noting the minutes of the AGM. We'll deal with the content of the AGM minutes at the next AGM, but simply for noting, because there are a couple of people who said that they haven't seen the minutes. So I thought I'd just copy them in here so that you do have them for noting. We will then move on to the first of the main sections, which is finances, where we've got special levy reconciliation that has been prepared by Mervyn Genendez, our treasurer. We've got, simply for noting, our 10-year maintenance report, which is the document against which the budgets are normally done and the plans are normally put into operation. And this is our second 10-year, or rather the first was a 5-year plan. This is our second plan, which is a 10-year plan. Mervyn has also very kindly done a water recon for us, which has been attached. Those are simply for general discussion and the finances. I will then move over to the questionnaire and just give you some general feedback and brief feedback. Really haven't had an opportunity to tabulate, given that on Friday afternoon I was just in the process of just trying to summarize what we'd received so far. Then we're talking about the levies, and there I've asked Mervyn to talk about just projecting the current rate of increases of the levies as they stand at the moment. And then I know there's an item that Warren wants to address, which is possible mechanisms to reduce the levy increases. And the one thing I can tell you from the questionnaire, ladies and gentlemen, there's 100% interest in seeing us bring our levies down. So we know we're onto a good thing when we start focusing on the levies. There's 100% interest, and that's not the special levies, that's our actual current levy state. So I know that Warren has got some ideas, and that's why we put that on the agenda. Then we'll have a discussion on the possibility of redevelopment. I really don't want us to spend too much time on. Sorry, I'm just. Won't you just see what Ronald wants? I think maybe he's just trying to connect. We don't want to spend too much time on the partial redevelopment, because in fact there were only 30% of owners who were interested in the partial redevelopment plan. So we're taking that off of the table, and we're simply talking about the potential for the redevelopment itself with the building. But really, again, it is one of the ideas that we embarked upon 3 years ago to examine how we can reduce the impact of the levy on us. It's not the only idea. I know that, for example, Warren has other ideas, and I assume or presume that people around the table have other ideas as well. I do want to disabuse a notion, though, and that is there seems to be a narrative going around that we are all consumed with the redevelopment plan of Terra Mare. Well, we're not all consumed with the redevelopment plan of Terra Mare. It was one of the things we discussed that we would investigate, but certainly it is on the back burner until such time as we have 100% agreement from owners. At the moment, we only have 63% agreement from owners on the redevelopment. So it is very much into the future, but it is a mechanism for examining how we can actually reduce the load on 35 odd owners for a building the size of ours in the state it is. So we do welcome other opportunities for other investigations. However, none have been forthcoming to date except for, well, reduce the levy. And I think Mervyn will talk to why it's not necessarily possible to reduce the levy. But we'll talk about that later. It's on the agenda. Then we're talking about supervisor. And I have put this on the agenda because it is time. And you'll see from the answer to the question is that the vast majority of owners want us to accelerate the succession plan for the management of our building. When we say accelerate, we spoke about this briefly at our trustee meeting last week. And we're talking about over the next 2-year period. But we do need to put it on the agenda. There was a very good survey that was done by Steve Attlee for us on the current remuneration level of supervisors in Umhlanga. I hope you guys saw it. And I'll ask Steve to just address his survey when we come to that on the agenda. But we do really need to talk about supervisor succession, because what was apparent to me, ladies and gentlemen, from the questionnaire that we distributed was this: that the kinds of things that require a system, and the first part of our system is our supervisor. The second part of our system is our management agents. So the kind of thing that require a seamless system to be working for our building, for whatever reason, not all the time, but from time to time, is breaking down. Primarily around issues like security, primarily around issues like leaks in balconies, and also primarily around issues which are emergency issues, like, for example, when we have the floods. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying in any way that the staff we've got don't throw 1,000,000% of themselves into dealing with issues. However, the system itself is an imperfect system that we need to try and improve upon. I think it's primarily to do with communication and the inability at the moment of our current supervisor to use internet effectively, and thereby to use it in association with ResCore, etc. And so as we talk about succession, I think we need to talk about an individual or people who are tech savvy enough to take some of the headaches away from the trustees. And what I mean is that the trustees shouldn't be dealing with insurance companies. The trustees shouldn't be dealing with claims for leaks or geysers, et cetera, et cetera. And unfortunately, there's too much dependency on the trustees and not enough dependency on that supervisory management agency link. And again, Steve, please don't take my comments personally. I am attributing the breakdown in the chain in that system to an inability to actually use the system that's in place. And I think, Mervyn, I think you might agree when you talk about the water, that one of the reasons that we've incurred so much expenses on the water is because of a breakdown in that system. But we'll talk about that when we talk about the water. Under general, I have put down confirmation of the rules that have been revised by Steve, and those have been distributed. And then also just a notification to all owners of the fact that our insurance reevaluations are coming up in 2020 or this coming year, and I'll just address that very, very briefly. Are there any items that anybody wants to add to the agenda? Nothing around this side. Don't hear anything from your side. All right, so let's start. Okay. So the item number 5 on the agenda, which is minutes, this isn't where we want to discuss those minutes. Those minutes are simply for your noting, and we will then go over those minutes in detail at the annual general meeting. But they're simply to make sure that everybody has copies of those minutes. I have distributed them via email. I've also distributed them via WhatsApp, and I've distributed them via this invitation for this go-to meeting that was sent out to all of the owners. Ladies and gentlemen, if I can just ask you this, just as an aside. From time to time, there are people telling me that there are other people who should be getting the emails that we're sending out. So please, if I can just ask you again, just to send me an email with all the email addresses you want included for your unit. I'm well aware that some of your units are owned by 2 or 3 or even more people, and you want everybody included in the communication. Very simple to do. I just need you to send us the email addresses, and we'll do that. When you do, by the way, if you could also maybe also send cell phone contact addresses, it could just be very helpful for us to be getting those from you. So thank you for that. All right, so I'm gonna move now to item number 6, which is finances, and this is Mervyn Ganende's section. So Mervyn, if I can ask you to address, we've got 3 items: the special levy recon, the 10-year maintenance report, and the water bill reconciliation. I'm going to ask you to address a 4th thing as well, and that is the narrative, and this is a second narrative going around, that our budget is all over the place. There is no control over the budget. Our levy is high because we're not controlling budget and expenditure items on the budget, and that we can have a significant, in fact, it's been specifically mentioned, at least 33% reduction in the levy if we were simply to manage our finances according to the budget, which creates the levy in a more structured and a more professional way. That's the narrative that's circling at the moment. And what I'd like you to do is, from the beginning of how Rescor manages income and expenses to how it's accounted for on an annual basis to how it's audited, I'd like you just to give us a brief indication of that, so that either we can agree with the narrative or expel the narrative, as politicians might say. So let me hand over to you, and you can talk into that.
Thank you, Ivan. Firstly, I'd like to thank Andy for his great assistance in putting together the detailed report. It's something that I was not keeping an eye on in terms of allocating the exact special levy expense to that expense. But thank you, Andy, for we've attempted to reconcile it, and moving forward, Andy has kindly, with Kogi, on now each expense will be allocated to that special levy. However, just talking about the special levy recon, is one of the issues is we would have a special levy for a particular expense. However, we would only collect from the owners that special levy over a period of sometimes 1 year, actually not 1 year, 2 years to 3 years. That means the following year, when we had an expense for another special levy, you'd start having 2 levies running concurrently for 2 years. So it did start getting a bit messy, but we've now, I think we're kind of on top of that between Kogi and Andy, looking at that on a daily basis. But having said that, at the end of the day, the expense is the expense, whether you itemize it or you don't, the bottom line. However, it just gives us more of a management tool to see where we're overspending and where we're underspending. But having said that, each time we do a special levy, it's based on getting quotes. And we normally get 2 to 3 quotes, and we still negotiate those quotes with the actual service provider. So those of you, are there any questions on the special levy report? You know, at the end of the day, it's showing that we have an excess of 354,000 over the last couple of years. You're asking where the money is. The money, if we don't spend it, lands up in our reserve fund, which is sitting at over R1 million, which is nothing for a building of our size.
Could you just explain the reserve fund, because there was some misunderstanding of it at the trustee meeting, and I'm sure the owners generally have the same misunderstanding. How do you constitute that reserve fund? What's it there for?
Okay, so 2 things. The one is we have a portion of it is compulsory under the Body Corporate Act, etc., that we hold a minimum of 25% of your levy income. So for us, that's not too bad. That's like R500,000. So we're okay on that. But then and that is for your general maintenance. But then also we have a 5 to 10 year what do you call it? Not a repairs and maintenance.
The plan that's been
the plan that has been circulated. Now, again, with a building of our age, to have R1 million when it can cost to repaint the building well in excess of that. And then also where we have an issue with emergency funds in terms of flooding, which is becoming more and more, what's the word? We're getting flooding more often and it's more intense. As you can see, the M5 to Benito is being closed off because some of the buildings at the back, the road collapsed there and washed into other buildings there. So we have to be very conscious of this.
So this is the plan that was circulated. It's a plan that was constructed about a year ago, right, Steve?
Not more.
Yeah, I think it was. Updated it recently as well.
This plan has been circulated, and it's against this plan that generally we examine activities into the future on an annual basis.
I can ask a question?
Sure, of course.
Sorry, guys, and please don't take this wrong ways. I'm just really putting stuff out there. My understanding of a special levy is one where it's a levy for something out of the ordinary. It's a non-maintenance item, if you look at the sectional title ruling, and it's if we have no money available and it is of an emergency nature. We are sitting with 3 times our minimum cover required, and yet we've got special levies for lighting and passages and all kinds of general maintenance things, which could quite easily be taken out of our existing surplus rather than putting that onto people. And the second thing I wanted to ask is on that 10-year plan, if you look at that, there's nearly 75% of that is made up of repainting and redoing lifts. 1.8 million for repainting in the next 6 years. Now, really, is that realistic? Because we could be overreacting to what our expenses are going to be, and of course, people are having to pay more for this. When in real terms, we may not need anywhere near that. As you can see, there's also 1.6 or 1.8 for redoing lifts. We've only just finished paying off the lift levy, so are these really legitimate numbers? Because we could be overinflating it and making it sound worse than what it actually is.
Mervyn?
So on that, the thing is, I mean, I understand where you're coming from. When you say 1.2, 1.3 million is a lot of money for a building of our age, okay, and it's nothing. I mean, other body corporates, so the guys sit with 10 to 15 million rand just in reserves. And unfortunately, it does, a lot of it comes to painting. And the other one is, okay, yes, I think you mentioned in one of the prior texts that you guys can get a lift redone, the shafts, etc., for 600,000 built, a new build. The figures where this came from were done by, we didn't do this 10-year maintenance plan. It was done by guys that specialize in the game. They came up with the figures based on their experience. So going back to the special levies, so we can't suddenly go and do an embankment for 700,000 rand and kill half our reserve funds, where 500,000 is required by law, and then to leave us with like 700,000 rand, which is nothing in today's terms. So these also, you need to go back a couple of years when we're in fact insolvent as a body corporate. It's taken us a good 5-6 years to get to a lousy 1.4 million rand. So you have to look at that.
So can I come in here and can I say this? So we've got a choice as owners, and our choice is to simply keep the 500,000 rand in reserve, which we have to by law, and to then take, and it's not 3 times, Warren, it's twice, so it's 500,000 plus about another 700 odd. To take that 700 and utilize it for things like, for example, the embankment, which we'd have to do for all of the plans, not necessarily taking this schedule of maintenance into account, but simply using it on the things that we know it needs to be used on, having nothing in surplus, and then having to address those factors. Nevertheless, how do we address those factors? They can't be addressed out of a maintenance plan because our current maintenance budget doesn't budget for special projects, which means that we're raising special levies again at a later stage. As things stand at this moment in time, if there's a special levy expense which is incurred, we pay that expense out of this reserve and then recover the amount over a 3-year period from our owners anyway. So it's either we use this money, we pay upfront, we don't recover, and then we need down the line additional income, which we're going to have to incur special levies for or not do the work that is required. Because remember, you're quite right. We cannot take extraordinary expenses out of our maintenance budget. Our maintenance budget there is for day-to-day routine maintenance on the building. It's not for special projects which get authorized from time to time, or as with the water and as with the floods, not for special projects which need to get authorized because there's been an act of God that we can't be accountable for down the line. This is the problem we had prior to Mervyn stabilizing our budget and our special reserve, let's call it that way, where there was absolutely no funds in the kitty to deal with urgent matters for the building. And it took us, what, a good 7 years to get out of the dwang at that stage, Mervyn? I would far rather be in a situation where we've got 500,000 in reserve than nothing in reserve where there are issues that we're going to have to address. For example, what happened with the lift? The lift was not a routine repair job. The lift was the fact that we were being shut down because we had not addressed those items over time. And Otis, our lift management company, managed to buy us enough time with the licensing authorities to get the lift repaired. Now, in that instance, there's no choice. We had to raise that special levy because otherwise our lift would have been shut down in the building. So it's for that purpose that we built this reserve up in the first place. Now, in any business, if you don't have prudent accounting principles, which include creating a reserve for your business, that's, by the way, why you retain dividends, and that's why you retain funds in your businesses, to actually make allocation for those special needs. That's what's been done here, and I want to take my hat off to Mervyn. I think we've done it well.
Just another point. Talking about.
Sorry, can I interrupt there? Can I interrupt because we're talking about special levies and levies. Now we know that the standard levy should cover the maintenance of the building. Painting of the building is not a special item, it is a maintenance item. There's a big difference between a special levy and a normal levy when it comes to selling your unit. All special levies have to be recouped from the seller of the unit when they sell the unit. So somebody who has a special levy for painting, they sell their building, they've got to continue and finish that levy and settle that levy with the purchaser, what have you. When they sell. So it's a bit ridiculous to have these maintenance.
Sorry, just to correct you on something. So the reality is this: the repainting of the building doesn't come out of our maintenance levy. The repainting of the building happens every 5 or 7 years from time to time when the owners agree it's time to repaint the building. The repainting of the building in terms of patch-up comes out of maintenance. So, for example, there might be a need, like we had with the floods. There might be a need to repaint the ground floor because it's been messed up by the floods. That would be taken out of the maintenance. But the reality is between 500,000 and 700,000 rand is the cost of repainting of the building. That's not included in the maintenance budget on a year-by-year basis. We don't do that, and certainly it's never been indicated that that's been a requirement of our maintenance budget, because then our maintenance budget would be far, far higher than it is currently. The second point I want to make is this, based on what you just raised, and it's a good point. An owner agrees to a special levy. The work is done. The special levy could be for the painting of the building. The owner then either commits to pay that special levy up front or to protract it over a 3-year period. The owner then goes ahead and sells his unit. The owner is accountable and responsible for exhausting the special levy obligation to the building. Even if the owner decides, and I don't know if it's legal or not, to pass that on to the new owner, it is the original owner who agreed to the special levy's obligation to the body corporate to settle that special levy. That's, Steve, as far as I understand, that's the way the regulations go.
That's correct, Alan.
Can I just mention in terms of levy?
I disagree in terms of the painting. I think painting of a building is a general known maintenance and it happens regularly. We've said it was 700,000 the last time we painted. I'm not sure it was 400,000. We've got a budget for 1.6 billion or something in 5 years' time, or whatever it is. We just paint the building. We've got to be realistic about these numbers. Mervyn came up with a figure of 1.6 million for the lift. I phoned a couple of quantities who told me it was 600,000. I then phoned up a lift consultant who said, Rod, actually 600,000, a little bit light. If you've got to take the existing lift out, it's 800,000. but we've got a figure quoted now 1.6 million. Don't know where that came from. You're speaking to the wrong people. So you've got to be realistic about these numbers.
All
And
right.
know where we
So,
can
are you referring to the provision that has been made in the 10-year maintenance plan?
I was quoted this figure at our meeting last week, and I immediately thought, oh, that's a big number in terms of the lift.
The
So I'm
amount of
just
the
saying
10-year
these are
maintenance
which are
the escalated cost in the 10-year maintenance plan is 1.684 million, which is a 10-year projection for what it's going to cost to maintain the lift. It's not, and that's 2027, by the way, and it's certainly not something that is on our horizon, quite frankly, because we've just done the lift. There are a couple of things that have to be fixed on the lift.
Just that you should know. Okay. Besides that, you've got the garage roofs. Okay, and then the roof of the building above you guys
Is leaking.
Is leaking. Okay, which we've got quotes around about 400,000 to 500,000. We've got the embankment coming up at say 700. You've got the lifts where they're saying that the cables and the motor have to be redone. Even if you take a number of 400,000 to 500,000, then we've got the pool, which comes under ongoing maintenance. But then the garage roofs and the whole garage area is something that we haven't even looked at yet. Take the roof of the building, take the back embankment, take the lift, take the roofs of the garages, and we're up to another 2 million. So before we've even got onto our 10-year maintenance.
All right, so guys, look, I understand what's going on here. And that is that everyone is concerned about escalating costs. No question about that. The reality is this, that we're either taking a view that our involvement in the building is only our flat and our unit. And in fact, a number of owners have said that to me. Why should I pay for the lift? Or why should I pay for the gardens? I'm on the 4th floor. The bottom line is that if we do not understand as owners that we are collectively accountable for the common area as well as for our own units, then these discussions are going to go nowhere. It is our legal obligation. We are all equally accountable, not only for our units, but for the common areas in the building. And indeed, when we sell our flats, it is very much based on those common areas as much as it is based on the flat and the units themselves. However, the point I'm trying to make is this. What I think is being ignored here is that we have a maintenance budget, and I actually think that our team does very well under that maintenance budget in not incurring additional expenses that could be incurred along the way. Then we have a need for special projects from time to time, and there seems to be a disagreement on whether or not painting of the entire building should come under the maintenance levy or is a special project. The reality is that we've chosen to see it as a special project because we do not budget for the entire painting of the building out of our maintenance levy. If what Warren is suggesting here, that we make a provision in our maintenance levy so that when we do need to paint the entire building, we have built up a collective reserve to paint the building, it is precisely the same as a special levy, but the impact that it will have is to increase our normal levies because we're making provision for a painting project down the line. So it's what did it say, half a dozen of one and two of the other, or six of the other. But the reality is we can think about it. We can take advice. And Steve, I would like to take advice, just like you've done in the supervisory thing, to look at a couple of buildings and see how they do it, make provision for the big jobs, such as, for example, the lifts and the painting, etc., and then come back by the time of the AGM so we're in a position to have a more informed way to move ahead on this subject. But maybe I can just ask those of you in other buildings around the table, outside of those who've already spoken, just to tell us what happens in your buildings and how you actually deal with projects of the nature of painting the building. Where do you budget for that? Do you budget for that in your normal maintenance budget, or do you budget for that as a special project? The lifts possibly, I don't know, things like resurfacing the pool, if the pool needs to be resurfaced. Thank God that's not our problem. But if it was, any ideas? How do you, and there are a number of you who sit on other body corporates, how do you actually allocate that from a financial and from a budgetary perspective? Just to get an idea.
Hi, this is Mervyn. In the other two buildings, they have a paint levy, which you pay every month. You contribute towards a painting levy.
So that would be like what Warren's suggesting, that you have an additional maintenance levy
no,
for
he's
painting.
saying no. So he doesn't want any. That's a special levy. It's a levy that you just pay every month. So we pay, I don't know, a couple $100 a month. and they accumulate the funds, and then they use it to repaint the building. So what we do in Terra Mare is when we need to paint the building, we raise a special levy, we pay for the painting out of our reserve funds, and then we collect it back from the owners over 3 years. So at the end of the day, you're still paying the same amount of money. It's which way you hold your mouth now. So we've got to decide, you don't like the way I'm holding my mouth, and we're going to call it something else? Okay, but at the end of the day, you still got to pay. Whether we increase your monthly levy or we bring out a special levy, end of the day, it comes out of the same pocket.
I think the point is, though, and the point has been made, that if you're buying a flat to do it up and to flip it, then the special levy will hit you hard, because you've actually got to pay the special levy out of the sale of that unit. And hence there would be some people who object to dealing with repainting the building as a special levy, because their intention is to flip the unit, to flip the flat, and they don't want a long-term obligation. I can fully understand that. That is a business rationale for having bought the flat. On the other hand, myself as an owner, my objective is long-term, and being long-term, I understand the difference between a normal routine maintenance levy and a special project, such as, for example, having to repaint the building or having to do up the lift, etc., etc. So it really is a matter of opinion, and maybe we need to talk about that in some kind of detail at the annual general meeting, after we've got an idea of what happens in other flats and other units. If you're comfortable, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to just... Yes, sorry, Andy, yes.
You know, I agree with what Martin's saying. It is very confusing at the moment whether somebody calls it a maintenance repair job, a special project maintenance repair job, a maintenance levy. And
so maybe we should relabel it.
Clear understanding of what it means. For instance, at the moment, we're paying this 850 rand a month for a maintenance levy. At the same time, the person looks at the...
Sorry, just tell us what that is. 815 rand. No, but that's the CPOS requirement. That's not a... Steve, just tell us what that 815 is.
I didn't get what the question was.
There is an 815 maintenance levy that we're paying.
Yeah.
Could you just tell us what that is, that maintenance levy? It's not a special levy.
That was for the painting and the waterproofing. But let me just touch on this very quickly, okay? We manage over 140 schemes.
Okay.
I would say the normal course of action is, I'd say probably 80%, 85% of our schemes is to raise a special levy when you undertake a painting project. Very few schemes paint in-house and start one at a particular point in time and paint over the year. By the time they get to year 3, they're back at the starting point. But we do have schemes that do that. So that's incorporated into their annual maintenance cost. But 85% of the schemes raise a special levy. I think the problem with Terra Mare is your special levies run for too long. And that's where you have too many overlapping. That's just my opinion. You know, I look at the schemes out there. They're generally 3 to 6 months max for a specific levy. Yes, some will stretch it to 12. But to run a special levy for 3 years, I think it's personally, I think it's...
Steve, I just want to see if I get you correct. What you're really saying is that it's common practice for a special levy not to run over a 12-month period, and yet we run our special levies over a 36-month period because, well, quite frankly, because owners have asked for that. So what we need to make a decision then as a body corporate as to whether or not we want special levies to run over an extended period of time or restrict them to 12 months. Is that what you're saying?
I think it's not what, that's what I'm saying, okay, but it's not what I'm saying is right or wrong. What I'm saying is I'm seeing the majority of the schemes is the special levies are way lot, the timing of the special levies is a lot less than what Terra Mare is running. And I think the confusing thing is then you start getting a second special levy in the year 2, but you're running a current one, etc. And that could be the problem. I mean, let's take a painting project costs 400,000 Rand at Terra Mare now. And let's just, for numbers' sake, say there's 40 units at Terra Mare. I know there's not, okay? That's 10,000 Rand a household, a section, okay? Over 3 months, that's like 3,000 Rand. It's done. It's finished over 3 months. Or over 6 months, it's going to be 2,000 Rand. Yeah, so that's something. I think that you seriously need to look at your time frame of your special levies. I think it's too long.
All All right. So look, let's put it this way. Can I just put it this way, just to move ahead? There's absolutely nothing we can do about the pre-existing special levies. But what we can do is, if there is a need for special levies, and I certainly hope in the next at least 2 years we won't have a need for special levies, but whatever, if there is a need for special levies which comes up at the next annual general meeting, we then make a decision firstly as to whether or not we are going to be prepared to extend it over a period beyond 12 months or restrict the special levy repayment period to 12 months, and then to decide on whether or not we want to authorize a special levy at all, depending on when it comes up and what the nature of that levy is. I think that's prudent accounting. Unfortunately, there are a number of owners who have asked for a dispensation beyond 12 months simply because of cash flow. But I do think it gets us into trouble, and I think it makes it very confusing, as Andy has said, because what we've agreed now is that every time there's a special levy, and that's retroactive as well as going forward, all income and all expenses will be done on an account-by-account accounting basis. And it won't simply be a globular kind of special levy account for income and expenses from that account. So we don't lose track of the management of those accounts and of those projects. We're able to account on a project-by-project basis. So thank you for that, Andy. Sorry, you wanted to say?
I still haven't got a response to my inspection.
Okay, so
if a person looks over here, it's the third item on the actual versus budget list that you set up. We have got this maintenance special, and quite honestly, I don't know what it's for. And it cost them each person like 100 rand.
And do you know what it is?
We changed the name.
So
we should take it off maintenance and
yeah, we changed the name of one of the special levies.
Thanks.
I think at one of the last meetings, it was discussed that the name be changed to call it. It was not a special levies. There were two special levies running concurrently, and it was a change of name somewhere along the line. And it wasn't too long ago. It was about 3 months ago, because at one of the meetings we discussed a whole lot of people.
Yeah. Special levy renovations is something.
Yeah.
That special levy renovations is still existing. And then over and above that one is this one, which is identified somebody last meeting.
Yes.
That we should have a maintenance special levy. If a person's got a special levy, you need to know what the value of that special levy is. Yeah. And what it's for. And I don't know what it's for.
Steve, Rescore, can you look into that? If you look at any of the accounts that are going out now, we have there's the CSOS levy, which we all understand. The security levy, we understand. There's the maintenance levy, and okay, but then there was the lift one, which has now disappeared. And if we look at the November accounts, you've got your levy, you've got Terra Mare special levy, the CSOS levy, the security levy, and then there's this maintenance one. So we're still running 2 levies at the moment. If you can get a breakdown on, because if you go back to the notes somewhere along the line, we changed the name.
I saw the AGM.
Yes.
Says that we're going to start the maintenance levy, and I'm saying, what is that in place of? What is that for?
Yeah.
What is the value of that
Yeah.
special levy?
Yeah.
At the moment, you're saying that we have collected, what is it, 66,000 for the total Terra Mare to date.
Yeah.
What's it for? What are you collecting it for?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mervyn and Steve, can you hear me?
talking about it, Andy.
No.
There's the bottom one there.
Yeah.
Special levies. Now there's
Completion.
There's called completion and boundary work.
Yeah.
But in our invoice it says special levy
Maintenance.
All right, so we're agreeing then that there's a reconciliation between this list of special levies, and what you're referring to now in terms of the invoices we're getting on a monthly basis from Rescore.
Yeah,
Right.
we need to know what they.
Absolutely. So, Steve, will you action that, please?
Yeah, I can answer that quite quickly as well.
Okay.
It was at the last AGM, if I'm not mistaken, where we had a special levy in place for, I don't think it was for anything, to be quite honest. It was just running. And that's why I said to the members of the meeting, you can't have a special levy running indefinitely, okay? It's got to be for a specific project.
Okay, so
Remember that.
I remember the discussion.
Okay.
The discussion was specifically, it was in relation to a particular levy that was ending, that was almost being paid out. And the discussion was, well, we will continue it as a provision for additional expenses. And then the point was made about the labeling of that. But the agreement was that that levy wouldn't be extended because we voted on a new levy, on a new special levy category to be specific.
No, my understanding there was that it would be termed a maintenance reserve levy and those funds go directly to your reserve fund. That's my understanding.
With no period.
I don't remember.
No. You see, what schemes do is they put maintenance reserve levies in place, that whether they've got sufficient funds or not, and it's indefinite. It's year to year. It's obviously approved at the AGM. Do we continue with it? Depending on what you've accumulated in your investment to your reserve fund, okay? So at that last AGM, we said we determined, because legally speaking, in terms of the Act, it should be a special levy to talk for a specific project. But you can put it towards your maintenance reserve fund until the next AGM.
Okay,
and that's what my understanding.
Hold on, but then Warren is absolutely correct. Warren is correct that we don't need two sets of levies. If we have not discontinued that levy that came to an end and it's now called a maintenance levy, we don't need a second provision for another levy. Yes?
No, but if you look at that, the first levy for the 750,000, virtually 80% of that we've already paid up. That was the lifts, it was a whole pile of things. And that's why when you looked at that second levy, I 100% agree with you. You know, I'm sure we're more than adequate just with the individual single levy. And so it looks like we've got a level of duplication at the moment with two levies running concurrently.
Warren, thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. Steve, we need to correct that straight away. We don't need the duplication of the levy. It'll bring all of our levies down by between 700 and 800 rand, and I'm very happy for that. And Andy, thank you for pointing that out to us, because it'll certainly save us all a lot of money. All right, moving on. So how do I put this diplomatically? I wouldn't like to be in a position in a year's time where we have a accounting function in place, we have an auditing function in place, and it's only by the deep review of trustees that we're picking these problems up. I would hope that we are, from an accounting perspective and an auditing perspective, able to depend on the proactiveness to avoid these kinds of overlaps and problems in the future. And maybe it's only because of custom and practice and the way things have been done previously, but we don't necessarily need to wait to this point to pick up this kind of duplication in the future. So Andy, thank you for your help. And I hope that it won't discontinue at this stage, because the work has just started, not finished. So thank you for that. Hey? You'll find some more for us, please. If you can save us $1,000 a meeting, you know, we'll meet tomorrow. Absolutely, we'll meet tomorrow. Thank you for that. But I hope you get the seriousness of the point that I've just made as well. So thank you all for that. All right. The water bill recon. Where are we on the water bill recon?
We're done.
Yes, sir.
Before you leave finance,
yes.
Any serious consideration in putting the supervisor's plan and building a middle cabinet on the line?
Okay, so the question, sorry, I'm just going to repeat your question so that they can hear it. The question is, has any serious consideration been put into building a supervisor's flat in a less expensive part of our premises, a little bachelor flat, and selling the existing unit as prime property in the building, or renting it out, in fact, if not selling it out? So in other words, to derive income from that unit. So that brings me to Steve. And Steve, we can just bring item 10.A forward at this stage and say, in the reconciliation that you did of what supervisors are being paid around Umhlanga, in that reconciliation, what was the state of flats in terms of being included in that reconciliation, in the packages of those individuals? I'm just going to pull the file up here for those around the table. But Steve, maybe you could address that for us, please.
But the schedule that I sent you,
yes,
I think it was 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10. The 10 schemes I sent you.
Yes,
that is the only one that has accommodation included in its package. We do have other schemes where supervisors do have accommodation included. And then thereabouts, very similar to what Paddy is on, around the 10,000-12,000 basic, and a flat thrown in there as well.
So,
to answer your question.
If I understand you correctly, you're saying that at least a portion of the schemes don't necessarily provide a flat or a unit, although I must say that a number of owners, and I would say by far the majority of owners who've spoken to me about this, have said it's very useful having a supervisor on site. I do need to say that. For example, with the floods, it was very, very useful having a supervisor on site at the time. And certainly in terms of crisis interventions, it's equally very useful. So I'd imagine that the point we're maybe needing to discuss again by the AGM is less that we don't want our supervisor to be on site, but more about us wanting to have him on site in an area which doesn't cost us what a prime unit is currently costing us, such as the current supervisors. That's the point you were making, right?
I'd just like to see the 2 million, which is the difference between selling of that unit and the building of a small bachelor in the back.
So the point that's been made is a very good point, and that is that there would be roughly a difference of about, let's be conservative and say 1.5 million rand between what it would cost us to rebuild a unit for the supervisor and being able to regain from the current unit that the supervisor occupies. That 1.5 million rand would be a cash injection into the building itself. That's the point that's been made. And certainly what we can do is we can investigate that. We can bring it to the owners sooner than the AGM, quite frankly. I'd imagine by the end of February, we should have a proposal for the development of a supervisor's unit. And the discussion might be, is it a 1 or a 2 bedroom unit at that stage, given that there are a couple of owners who've said they'd like to see a husband and wife team eventually in place rather than just one person. But nevertheless, whatever it is, we can do both of those, a 1 and a 2 bedroom kind of a unit option, see what the expenses are. And in fact, if that's by agreement, we can initiate that as a proposal and see if we can't bring it to owners to at least see by the end of February and then to start engaging upon.
Warren?
Sorry, Warren, just point of clarification from Mr. Allen, and then I'll come to you.
Thank you.
The building of that little unit wouldn't really disturb everyone because it would be built from the back row.
So what Mr. Allen has said is that if we build that unit at the back row, at the back of the building, presumably on the third floor, it wouldn't disturb anybody.
But we also have the mains quarters that can be redesigned.
Yes. Okay. All right. So
That was the next point. The domestic quarters, are they being occupied on?
No, they're not. From time to time. And most of the time by existing staff. So what we'll look at the development of a staff quarter, if I can put it that way, which quarter will include an allocation of a decent spot for the supervisor, but not to the extent it currently is. Yeah, so we'll certainly look at that, and we'll try to put a couple of proposals forward. Okay, so thank you for that. Sorry, Warren, sorry to disturb you. You want to come in now?
I'm sorry, okay, I'll just go quickly. The other option I also have thought of on that too, Ivor, was that we sold that unit at say 2.753 million and gave whoever bought it a return of investment of say 7.5 or 8%. We would be paying probably about a 15,500 rand per month out of our levies towards that. But what it would do, it would give us an immediate 3 million rand injection, which could put our block absolutely on the map if you take what you could do with that. From a point of view of retiling, redoing it, we could absolutely change that block within 6 months with that sort of liquidity.
Warren, could I ask you to maybe do that on a page for us and send it to me that I can then send out to owners, showing those numbers, because I think they're very attractive.
Because then we could rent. So you may have someone with money who says, look, for 2 years, I'm happy to tie up, say, 3 million, and I'm happy to get, say, an 8% or 7.5% return on it with an escalation. So we're not putting out a whole lot of money to build something. All we out is 15 grand a month towards it, which is roughly what it's probably costing us now to have it. but it gives us that immediate cash injection.
All right, so
And then by having that,
if you could reduce that to writing, we'll get onto it straight away in terms of circulating it to owners.
Banks, we can do all of this stuff, and with the surplus we've got, you'll probably find we don't even need any form of special levy, and we've got a beautiful block that's been fully upgraded.
Fantastic. I appreciate that. Thank you very much for that input.
Sorry, but I want to find out, like, don't you think we should finalize, like, before we go and spend all this type of money and do all this type of work, if the building's going to be redeveloped or not going to be redeveloped?
So, Jerry, that's the next item on the agenda. That's item number 7, which is feedback on the questionnaire, and then flowing from feedback on the questionnaire, item number 9, which is the total redevelopment. But maybe before we do that, though, could we just go to 10, because we started with looking at the remuneration survey, but could we now just talk generally for a couple of minutes around what we want to do about Paddy, about our current supervisor, and how we maybe want to handle the current supervisor dilemma that many owners, I would say the majority of owners, have pointed to in the questionnaire as being front of mind for them. So I'd like to throw it open to the floor and get your ideas. It's not on the quality of our current supervisor, good or bad. And I think majority of people are very grateful for the work that's been done today. The question is moving ahead and risk managing the fact that I think everybody agrees it is time to replace the supervisor. We have looked at a couple, and thank you very much for the CVs, Steve, that you forwarded to us earlier in the year. But now we need to, I think, move into the next year, which is to say that if not over the next year, then at least over the next 2 years, we need to be in a position of succession for the supervisor position. And I'd like to just open it to the floor and just get your ideas. Rod, you have very kindly made a suggestion on your side as to knowing someone who is in the market at this moment in time. Maybe you want to kick off.
Thanks, Albert. Let's just check with Steve sitting opposite me here, because he probably knows this gentleman. I hadn't mentioned it to him earlier. Steve, you know Dave Crew. He was involved with URP. I used to run the beachfront. Okay, so Steve does know him. So this chap, I've known him for 40 years, and he lives down the road. He actually lives just off Park Drive. So to be honest, he's within 100 meters of the block. So I don't know whether he could stay there and operate Terra Mare. He might like to have the accommodation. He definitely has said to me recently that he would like, he's at the age now where he would like to look at a supervisor type job. He's one of those sort of macabre guys, as I've mentioned. He can fix anything, very together guy, and he's been a local of Umhlanga for the last 40 years as well. So he knows the place very well. So he was my suggestion, just because in passing he mentioned that the fact that he would be looking for that kind of job. What happened with him at URP? I think Enforce had the contracts to run the beachfront and what have you, which was terminated maybe 6 months, a year ago. So from that, he lost that position. And so that's why he's looking at this as an option. I have mentioned a term, and I've told him to put something together in paper. And I said, I've known him for 40 years, and I think he's perfect for the job. I was actually looking at perhaps using him at another project, probably I'm involved in on the North Coast, where we have also a supervisor who's sort of been in hospital quite a bit recently, and he probably also needs to be replaced. But that's an hour and a half drive away, so he'd probably be more keen to stay in the Umhlanga area.
Mervyn?
Hi. My suggestion is that we make a decision and come end of first quarter, we have a replacement already. You can't drag it for another year or two. I think we've gone past that stage. And I think possibly we're having that owners get together.
I sent through a date this morning, a proposed date for the 26th at 5 o'clock for those who are there.
Maybe we can invite this guy. We don't have to disclose who he is, and he can walk around with us and have a look, and we can make a decision.
Okay.
At least, because then at least there'll be a handful or more owners that will physically meet the guy and can make, we can all make a decision there and then afterwards. Say, yep, this is the guy we're going for, and let's move ahead rather sooner than later and stop dragging this on.
Yes, sir, please.
Okay, so I haven't seen that note.
Sorry,
The 26th of December.
Just give us,
Day, is it?
just give us a second on this side. There's just a question. Yes, sir.
Does that guy have experience as a supervisor?
So the question is, does he have experience as a supervisor?
I would say no. No. Not that I know of. But he really is the kind of guy that, you know, he's the kind of guy you want if you break down the bush because he's going to be under the car fixing it. He's that kind of guy. And he's a very together guy.
All right. So I think the point that's being made here is that what we want to do is we want to include this guy in the list, but we want to open up the list and have a short list by, let's just say, a short list also by the end of February, from which we can then make recommendations to the owners. Include this guy in that interview process, whoever the trustees are who will be involved in the interview process, include him so that we can then have a short list to the owners by the end of February and, quite frankly, begin to make a decision, as Mervyn says, so that by the end of the first quarter we're making a decision, but the right kind of decision. I think the point that has been made here quite accurately is we've had the MacGyver types before, and please, that's with no inflection on this particular individual, but we've had patch jobs before that have in fact ended up costing us down the line because of what's been missed or because of the quality of work that's been done. Yeah, exactly. So thank you for that. All right, so, but I think there is a good point that is that we can at least have a meeting around the issue on the 26th, possibly just before our get-together as trustees. We can possibly, as trustees, meet with this guy as the first candidate. We can expand the list so that by the end of February, we're making recommendations of a short list of, let's say, 2 or 3 individuals to the owners as a whole. So thank you for that proactiveness, Rod. We really appreciate it. And we will start working on that and working on a document in that regard. So we've dealt then with looking at the remuneration survey. As you can see on that remuneration survey, our actual salary element for a 38-unit building is 12,308. There's 1,000 rand of allowances. There's another 10,000 rand of accommodation, and there's 1,500 rand average for the car allowance for the year, which really gives us a total package cost to company of 25,000 rand. One must assume, Steve, in these others, that these are salary amounts and not package amounts. But my assumption on that basis is that we are, certainly for a 38-unit building, we are quite, we are in the top 90th percentile of units in Umhlanga. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, you're correct.
So, Steve, but these all live-out numbers?
Just live-out numbers, yeah.
They live-out numbers, so none of these get accommodation now. Okay, so the one advantage perhaps with this chap I'm speaking about is that he does currently live within 100 meters of Terra Mare.
Which is very useful, because it means then that we're able to sell the flat, not have to necessarily build another supervisor's flat at this stage. It becomes very useful and very attractive for us down the line. Sorry, Mr. Allen, you wanted to say something?
I think there's a distortion here in that perhaps none of those other buildings have a massive garden that we've got, which is magnificent.
The point that Mr. Allen has said is that none of those buildings have the massive garden we've got. And so as a result, the current state of our gardens is an attractive feature of our building. That's what you're saying, Mr. Allen.
Absolutely. And takes up a lot of time and effort of the supervisor.
Okay, fair enough. Very good. That's a very good point. Mervyn?
I just want to make a comment. Because of my pet hatred of short-term renters, right? And and the issue there is that we need somebody strong 24/7 on the premises, because the people that are renting our place don't give a shit about us and our property and our privacy. And unfortunately, I suggest that we try have a live-in guy that can get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and go and sort out the problem. Because what are we going to do? At 2 o'clock in the morning, when the guys come home absolutely drunk out of their minds and start destroying the place, which has happened on numerous occasions. We have to have somebody on the ground that is big enough and strong enough, like this potential guy, to suppress the problem in 30 seconds and be done. So my recommendation is that we still have accommodation and not be short-sighted, unless we want to stop the short-term rentals, which I'd like to
Right,
put my vote
moving
in.
on. Francesca, you've got a point. Yes.
On the premises.
Yes.
They're strong enough to deal with
No,
that.
no,
I know they don't, but I'm
it's a
just saying,
security guard, a cheap security guard. It's not
if
good.
you do, then I don't think they're allowed button or something.
Except they cost, those are 24,000 rand a month.
We're going to deal with those people
Yeah,
sometimes.
correct.
They come upstairs and they make a noise and they throw cigarettes down and burn the awnings and whatever.
Does our security guard not have a button?
Yes, he does. And a radio. And a
But to
radio.
whom is he
But
connected?
he's connected to an ARP control room, and a supervisor comes out, and they are so scared now to say anything or do anything. They say, call the police. And they're not allowed to do anything. So at the end of the day, the security guard presses the button, a supervisor comes and he says, you know what, I can't get involved in this, let's call the police. And then we know.
All right, guys. Look, I just for purposes of brevity, I want us to maybe take this back into a trustees meeting so we can look at both the issue of the security and the issue of the supervisor as a joint issue, because I think they do need to be looked at as a joint issue, but potentially within our next trustee meeting, which will be around the end of January. So thank you all for that. Do you want a quick 5-minute break and then we come back to discuss the combination of the questionnaire and redevelopment, or should we just carry on? Just carry on. Okay, consensus is carry on. Please feel free to get coffee behind us. Burger King over there. There's McDonald's over there. And I'm sure in Durban, Steve's put the same stuff out for you guys. Good. So, guys, I just want to quickly give you some feedback from the questionnaire. It was absolutely great having everybody, or rather having 27 units actually respond to our questionnaire. It made me feel that for the first time, quite frankly, we are talking to owners in a concise way. And I hope, ladies and gentlemen, that you'll agree it's a good way of getting everybody's views. I hope you'll agree that it's an effective mechanism of seeing what people think, and that we should be using it more frequently in terms of how we manage Terra Mare activities. So just to give you a high-scale review, a top-end review of some of the important issues. First of all, what was interesting is that 70% of our owners have said in the last 3 years they've attended one or more of our AGMs, which is fantastic, because that means that discussion and the decisions made at the AGMs are in fact are critical, but in fact are at least known, if not always mandated, by our owners. And so certainly 100% of our owners are concerned about the amount of our levies. And I think that the reality is, and Mervyn, correct me if I'm wrong, but from a projection point of view, you're not projecting, but you're talking about 8% at least over how many years?
Every year.
No.
8% increase.
Okay, so you're talking about
Inflation,
a projection of 8% a year going forward, certainly nothing going back. So there's a major concern about our current levels of levies. But quite frankly, the only way you can reduce that, besides being prudent, and that's why we now have Andy, thank God, in our activities, but besides being prudent, the only way we can bring levies down is by having more contributing levy-paying units in the building. That's Mr. Francesca clapping for all of you. If you...
Sorry about my
Okay, no, thank you. Right. The point that has been made by Mr. Stiptovic, absolutely, is that we need more units paying levies in the building if we have any hope of bringing our levies down. And beyond, let's say, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, about 15% of prudent auditing. 15, 20% is the maximum that an eagle eye is going to have on the current levy from year to year. Would you agree with that? Nothing more than that. No, okay, fair enough. Okay, so moving on. As far as the development discussion is concerned, 93% of owners are aware of the fact that over the last 3 years we've been talking about potential for development. 63% of the owners actually support us on a redevelopment initiative within the building. Only 30% of owners support the notion of a partial development, which, just to remind you, was the development over the garage space and with an additional wing on the left-hand side, if you're walking into the building, only 37% of owners have said that that's something they would be interested in and where they see that adding value to the business. But 60% of the owners so far have agreed that a total redevelopment of the building is a prudent thing to continue to investigate and to think about. Unfortunately, you need 100% of owners agreeing with something as large scale as a complete redevelopment of the building. And quite frankly, I think we might get to that discussion around the AGM, but for the moment, we are looking simply at the management and the operational management of the building, because as was discussed at the trustee meeting, even if at our AGM in 2020 we agree on a total redevelopment of the building, it is highly unlikely that we will see the fruits of that in anything less than a 3 to 5 year period, which means that for that 3 to 5 year period, we would nevertheless need to continue with our operational and our maintenance activities in the building until such time as we'd made a 100% decision to scrap it. But we are very, very far from a 100% decision, given that 40% or 4 out of 10 owners actually reject the notion of any kind of redevelopment in the building. Ladies and gentlemen, on that spreadsheet that was circulated was a second tab at the bottom of the spreadsheet, which was a summary of general questions and answers on a variety of issues. I would urge you to read that. I haven't had an opportunity to tabulate those responses and to highlight to you as owners some of the greatest concerns, but that the general answers are there for everybody to see as the second tab on that spreadsheet. So the first tab is just a summary of the high-level decisions, not decisions, but the high-level yes or no's that were done, and the second tab is in-depth answers and concerns about a variety of issues, everywhere from the lift to the supervisor, that we will now be looking to tabulate and to summarize for you as owners, so we can have a clearer interrogation of those questions and answers. Sorry, is there someone trying to say something in KZN? Nothing?
No.
Sorry, we heard something. Okay, so moving on. Jerry, I know you wanted to have you wanted to make a statement about the potential for a total redevelopment of the building. And sorry to have cut you short a little earlier, but now's your time to say something if there's something you feel that needs to be said.
Yeah, but basically what I was trying to say was all these figures are coming in. We're going to take all this money, we're going to fix. We're still going to get those occurring problems continuous. In my opinion, because the building is old. The park work, the electrical, it's not in a good shape, that building. As we know, we keep on paying the levies and it keeps on coming. I mean, now I've got that place across the road there. Levies are like almost 40% less, but obviously we've got a lot more units in there. But there's no cost for anything. I mean, whatever they fix, it just comes out of their cost, out of what they've got as a budget. And if we really going to go waste all this money on this building that needs to come down, is it worth it? That's just my personal opinion. I don't feel it's worth spending all that money on this building. I would rather drop the building and put up a new building, but unfortunately, you've got to get 100%.
Rod, thanks, Jerry. Rod, I know you had a view on. Rod, I know you had a view on what the optimum additional number of units would need to be to meet the objectives we'd originally set out in the building, in terms of doing two things: putting enough money in to reduce the levy, but more importantly, on an ongoing basis, to make sure we made proper provision for maintenance in a new building. You did a calculation. You had a view on the optimum number of units. Could you just tell us about that?
Okay, Albert, just what I want to understand, because I've only been involved here for a year, what is the expectation of those people who want to redevelop the building and move from the 40-odd units we have to, as per the architect's plan, 90 units? What is their expectation? Do they think they're going to get a free unit out of the new development?
Yes.
What is the expectation?
So the expectation we discussed, and remember, we'd only had 2 discussions on this subject, so it's absolutely new to us at this stage. But certainly in discussion with the developers, a fair and reasonable expectation would be, number one, that our units would be replaced in the building, that in the development process of the building, that the costs inherent in, let's say, a 2 to 3 year development of needing to utilize the unit would be covered in that development plan, and that ultimately at the end of the day, with the additional resale of the additional units, we would have sufficient to pump into the property to create a maintenance provision into the future for a period of time. So we would end up with a new unit. We would end up with more units paying levies, and therefore our levies would come down. And more importantly, we'd end up with a maintenance fund in the building that would allow us to avoid special levies, at least into the foreseeable future.
Okay, so with that in mind, what's my investigation, and I have spoken to quantity surveyors, I've spoken to sworn appraisers and what have you, very experienced people. The bottom line is that in a development, generally the land cost cannot be more than 20 to 30% of the development cost, the overall development cost, for the development to be feasible, viable financially. So now I have asked a sworn appraiser what he thought the value of our property was, presuming that we can double the FAR to 4,000 square meters to 8,000 square meters. That's the rezoning. So 8,000 square meters is, so obviously the value is based on the bulk available. So 8,000 square meters, he says 6,000 rand per bulk square meter. That means the land cost of Terra Mare would be about 50,000. 8,000 square meters times 6,000. So in your development proposal, the one put together by EPA architects, they're moving from the 40 odd units that we have, 38 units I think it is, including the caretakers unit, moving from the 40 units to 90 units. 35, or I think they're 42 units are 3 bedrooms, the rest are 2 bedrooms. So what the developer would have to do in his mind, he has to pay in terms of land cost. I'm going to keep it simple. It's not a complicated equation. He has to pay for approximately 40 units, new units, and use that as the land cost to make it feasible. So 40 units at 100 square meters, 25,000 rand, a bulk development cost that covers all the verandas, the garages and what have you, is 100 million. You are short of half the value of your replacement units. So anybody who is expecting to get a free unit would be misinformed. You would actually effectively probably have to put in 1 million rand to cover the cost of his own unit, his own new unit in the development. Because remember, the scheme as it stands is to put garages in, 2 garages per unit. At the moment, you only got 1. They're all structured parking. All multi-level parking is all pretty expensive, and there's also common areas. So the 25,000 square meter is a right development cost of your bulk area, which is only your flat area of 100 square meters, exclusive veranda and other costs. So effectively, it's not possible in a very quick analysis for 90 units to cover the cost of 40. Sorry, it's actually the 90 units are not all 3 bedroom. Most of them are actually 2 bedroom. So you can't have an 8,000 square meter development where you're paying 4,000 square meters or half of it going to land cost and expect to come out without putting in any money.
All right.
So the bottom line is short.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Need about 3 times the current number of units to cover the cost of a free new unit.
So you're saying we would need 150 units rather than 100 units in the building?
You would need 30%. So you need 3 times the number of units. At the moment, we've got 2 times.
So we've got 40 at the moment. We'd need to go up to 120 to cover the objective.
You need approximately 120 units to cover the cost of 40 units.
All right. So now that we've got this explanation from you, we'll put this discussion to the developers and ask them to come back to us and start looking at the numbers based on their development proposal so that we can actually know we can compare apples with apples. So thank you for that, Rod. I really appreciate your input. And thank you for the time, by the way, you've taken, not just in looking at this proposal, but at the partial proposal as well, because you're the only engineer amongst us. So we appreciate it. They, of course, are not engineers, they're developers, so they do this for a living. But the bottom line is, as a combination of what you do on an engineering basis, what your wife does on a town planning basis, and what they do on a development play basis, should hopefully get us to a more prudent kind of a proposal that we could all consider. So thank you for that. We really, really appreciate your input. And Jerry, thank you.
I would just,
Yes, sorry, Rob.
just to carry on with that, because we talk about the numbers now. So the practicality in terms of feasibility is not there. Then we've got to remember that we have a town planning process to go through. So at the moment, I think we're GR2, and the requirement to develop these units would be to double the FAR, which is 8,000 square meters from the current 4,000 square meters. And that in itself is going to be a problem, in my mind.
Well, it's
so you're not talking.
We know it's a political problem. And we know that the vast majority of engineers and quantity surveyors in KZN are complicit in the problem, given with the building of the pearls and the oceans and the licensing of those buildings. So we know we're going to have, if we ever wanted to go that route, we know we've got to play a political problem rather than a town planning problem. But let's not even get ahead of ourselves. Let's look at the financial viability and then say, is it at all worth trying to take on the political challenge of doing it? But thank you for that. We appreciate it. I think your input has been absolutely invaluable. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, if I can now just move on. We've dealt. Sorry. Yes, sir. Yes, please. It wasn't the main purpose. It was one of the agenda items. So, what's your thinking, sir?
What I want to say is, firstly, I wasn't aware that there's an outside that was going to be Terra Mare owners.
No.
So if we're going to go to an outside development, then we are looking for some trouble, and we should look at ourselves as a developer first and do the feasibility and look at.
Can I just repeat what you said? I think that's absolutely critical. So what's being mentioned now is something very interesting, and that is that there's an owner who has said that he thought that the development was going to be done by ourselves as owners rather than an external development. And that he agrees that if there's external developers involved, we're on a hiding to nothing, paraphrasing what you said. Whereas if we were doing the development ourselves, there would be more feasibility to that project. That's what you said, right? A lot more involvement, financial involvement, you're implying. Okay, so that's very interesting. So there are a number of owners here who are saying that, if I understand what you guys are saying, is you're a lot more inclined to an internal development rather than an externally facilitated development. All right, no, fair enough. Thank you for that. Yes. Huge. Well, 100 million was said.
For the total development of the units, what if you're going to do 90 units at 2 million each?
Sure.
So I don't think we should throw those, but there's a massive involvement, and obviously that's going to need funding.
Yes.
That needing funding, then what have you got to fund? You've got a massive asset there now because there's land, and the land must be worth 48 million, if you said 8,000 times.
But Rod is saying it can only constitute, Rod, correct me if I'm wrong, between 30 and 40% of the total value of the development, the land.
20 to 30.
20 to 30. Okay, so there's conjecture here that might not be the case.
I think then what happens as well is that we have this asset which has got a land, that land is very
right. Prime land value, yes.
And then you've got 38 units or 35 units, which are worth. So now, if you take everything down, then that asset remains its only vacant land.
Yes.
So, who is going to lend you 200 million?
Only against the land.
So now the bank is going to go and say, if the owner is going to say, okay, guys, what's the value? 2.5 million. We want your personal sureties, guarantees. So these are So I think we need a very big, legal investigation
Sure.
to see how this whole package.
And to make sure that owners are not unwillingly exposed.
So is the construction, is the feasibility,
Sure.
is the legal.
Sure. Guys, I'm going to, just before I go to Donnie, and Donnie has his hand up, I want to emphasize, this is the only third time we're actually discussing it. So thank you for that. Yes, Donnie.
A few things. I don't think we can do it ourselves. I think we would not know where to start. The people who gave us the first proposal does this all the time, and they are very closely linked to Investec Bank. And they were quite satisfied that the proposal that they made, they would get the funding for. So, you know, I would like to hear their views of what Rod had said, because they were ready to go. If we were happy, they were ready to go. So, but yes, we'll just have to see. And no one ever said that anyone would have to put up security. Obviously, the land would be used as security for the bank. The bank's not going to build a building like that with no security, but it was never suggested to us that any one of the owners would have to stand surety for anything.
All right, so what I'm going to do. Okay.
If we have a developer like that, let's say it was 2 or 3 years ago, and it was required, said, here's the development, we've now got each of us have got an asset with 2.5 million or 3 million. So get demolished and then they fold. We use our guarantee.
Sure.
So that is the risk.
Of course. Absolutely. All right. So, guys, look, rather than, again, I mean, I know that there are a couple of people who are here only for this discussion, although we have a building to run, guys. But the point I'm wanting to make is we now have enough people who've spoken and indicated an interest for us to have an in-depth discussion together with the developers, together with guys like Rod as well, around this project in terms of where to from here, the assumptions, the exposure, particularly the financial exposure as has been mentioned.
So can I just repeat some of those figures? Because I heard something said about 100 million.
The
100 million.
Let me rather ask this question: Should we be spending this much energy if only 60% of the owners want it? Because you need 100%. So maybe we should just decide to call it.
I would agree with that. It's a non-starter.
I agree.
Exactly. And we now know we've got 40% that don't buy it.
We're looking for money. The money may exactly come from Paddy's unit. To create the building for everyone.
What about looking at putting a couple of other units on?
No, but we looked at that.
And they don't want that either.
That was rejected. Only 37% of the owners agreed to that.
Well, you don't have to give a reason.
No,
That's
but there are reasons. There are reasons. The reasons are the reasons have been distributed. So in that second tab, the reasons have, and I'll redistribute it again so that you can see what the reasons for rejecting the partial development is. And also, by the way, there's been a feasibility that Rod did as well on that, where he determined that physically it wasn't a practical proposal. We might actually ask for the developers to come back and respond to Rod's report. Okay, good.
As far as I'm concerned,
Sorry, Warren, just one point here.
There's not much structurally wrong with our building. So if we get the money and we have the cash flow and we sell that unit and we can upgrade that building, all of us get benefit from that.
Sure.
And it's an attractive building. I personally like the architecture. I love the gardens. I love the tranquility.
And the fact that there are only 38 units.
But then, if that is so, then everyone must know that they're going to pay very, very big premiums for that luxury. It's as simple as that.
You know, I have this debate often with my wife, and I say, you don't like it, sell. You know, if you don't like it, what's going on, sell.
No, but we have, as the trustees, take enormous pressure about the levies being as high as they are. So we have thought of ways and means to try and remedy that. But then everyone must just be sure that we will face 8% every year escalation. And we are, as Jerry has said, we are 50% higher than the buildings across the road.
But when you start upgrading the building commensurately, all our values will go up. And then you'll feel more comfortable with a higher value when your own unit's value has also gone up.
But it's not the value that pays the levies.
But I think the point that has been made.
You'll have a more valuable asset because the whole building has been appraised.
So if I can just come in here and say this, and I think that, Mr. Allen, thank you for this, because I think that with the introduction of the potential to sell the supervisor's unit and the opportunity to inject, let's be optimistic or rather conservative and say 1.5 million rand into the building, although if we do, as Rod has suggested, find someone who has their own flat, then potentially inject 2.5 million rand into the building, we should be able to not only take care of our short-term needs, but make quite a substantial provision into the future, which won't necessarily reduce our levies, but it would certainly take away the need for a special levy onslaught into the future, at least in the foreseeable future. So that's a very good point that has been made. Sorry, Mr. Allen, just before you, Mr. Allen, Warren, you were hanging on your side?
Yes, I was sorry, and again, please, I'm not sounding negative here. There's, as you know, very positive points of view from both sides. But at the moment, we only have a 60% buy-in, which effectively means we do not have a mandate to even continue. So do we really continue going and getting more quotes, looking at this alternative, that alternative, when in real terms, we don't have a mandate from the owners to go any further with the full knockdown and start again?
You make a very good point. You make a very good point. So let's say, and we can do this without needing to be a special general meeting. The reality is that at this moment in time, we know definitively that only 60% of the owners support any kind of redevelopment. The point has been made that we're essentially wasting our time without a 100% mandate. And therefore, until such time as there is an alternative proposal on the table that owners might reconsider, and we will separately look to engage with the developers to challenge them as we've been challenged by Rod, et cetera, and see if they can come back with a reasonable response. We will take it off of the table at this stage, and we will continue with a project that has been proposed, not today, it was proposed at a previous AGM by Mr. Allen, and that is to look at the supervisor's flat, to at the very least relocate the supervisor, and at very best extract what we can from the value of that flat to inject into the building. I think there's general consensus in that regard. And as it was discussed at a previous AGM, we don't need a mandate to continue on the supervisor's flat trajectory until such time as there is a formal plan in place to put it on the market. Then, of course, we need to come back to the owners and say, we now need a mandate to physically do this. So thank you for that, Mr. Allen. I think it was a critical suggestion. Sorry, you've got your hand up.
We could also do some development at the back and create garaging from the back. So you don't park your car, come straight down into the unit.
So what Mr. Allen has said is that we... Okay, so... All right, well, it's not on the table yet. All right, so let's we'll think around it. We'll put it for the trustees to think about, and certainly with people like Rod there, we can look at a planning around doing something like that. So what Mr. Allen is saying is maximize the utilization of the space at the top road and on top of the embankment to look at some kind of a solution around parking. It would also be a barrier against a future flood, no question about that. I think it needs a complete think around and think about, and we could raise it at the next trustee meeting and see how we proceed with maybe looking at a proposal around that. But for the time being,
if that is possible to build garaging there, we could build units where the garages are now without being too invasive.
We could.
Become partial.
Another.
Yeah.
But it's a different, quite extraordinary.
Sorry, on the thing about the back, there's a 7.5 meter building line off Park Lane.
Sorry, just say that again, Rob. Sorry, just say that again. Thanks, Andy.
Yeah, there's a 7.5 meter building line off Park Lane at the rear of the building, which brings you to the upper floor level. Okay, so structured parking would not be permissible. But you could, with off-grade parking wouldn't matter. But when you start building structures to house the parking, you have a problem.
So what you're saying is this: that if it was possible to get the municipality to agree to it, it might be practical.
you would have to have some sort of special consent because you'd be building a structure, because it has to be a structure because of the elevation you have to create there, to get up to park lane level. So
Sure.
yes, you would have to have a special consent application for relaxation.
All right, fair enough. So we can put that aside for the moment until such time as we have a letter of authorization from the council, and then potentially re-proceed. Mr. Allen.
It's not a redevelopment right in our face, which is the redevelopment of the garages proposal.
Fair enough. Well,
that's our
sure. Okay.
Because the question was, which would you prefer? So, you prefer the total redevelopment, but secondly, the partial could work to assist. So it was not thrown out to say, I don't know if your 60%, 65% was that preferred total.
Yes. 63, I think. Also would go for partial. Okay, so those percentages were either or, but there is a mixed component. Okay, so thank you for that. All right, guys, look, let's take this offline and let's try throw it around at the trustee meeting and see if we can't come up with something that's maybe sensible. Just as with the flat suggestion, the parking suggestion subject to council authorization might be practical, so it might be something we can look at in the future. But I'm well aware that there are a number of owners that say we can't get distracted by development, and I completely agree. We don't want to be distracted by development. I think Donnie has made a very prudent point, and that is that we are making as owners a decision for the time being that we will pay a premium to have a small building with 38 flats, big gardens, and we are making a decision as owners that we will carry that premium, acknowledging that it's going to get more and more expensive. And so, as you said, if you don't want to live there, then you say to your wife, sell. That's simple. So it's a good point you both made. Thank you both for that. All right, moving on. And thank you all. And again, Rod, Warren, we really, really appreciate your input into this discussion. I don't think we can move. And Mr. Allen, yes, yourself as well. That's an appreciatory clap from Mr. Allen for his idea about the supervisory flat. Thank you. Right. If we can now move on to Steve, because I'm well aware that we've only got 15 minutes left of this discussion. Steve, the rules that you have suggested, you did circulate them in August. What do you need from us as owners in terms of activating those rules now, Steve?
We need to have a special meeting, Ava. There's one of two ways to do it, either via special meeting or round robin. If we do it by special meeting, we need a quorum of 33 1/3%. So basically what you get your AGMs. And then we need 75% of the members present to vote in favor of those amendments. So it's a lot easier to achieve the amendments at the meeting.
Can it be done by round robin, or do you require a physical special meeting?
You can do it by round robin, but it's more difficult by round robin because you need 75% of all owners.
Is it all owners voting or all owners, period?
All owners. So if it's by round robin, it's 75% of all owners. If it's by general meeting, it's 75% of your quorum.
Okay. All right. So Steve, I'll tell you what I would like you please to do then when you get a chance, and that is to take this document you've prepared and to please then just do a comparative for us so that owners are aware of the changes. And then what we'll do is we'll begin with an online discussion as well as a questionnaire. If from the questionnaire we get in excess of 75%, then in fact we can do a round robin for that 75% to be confirmed, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, perfect.
So what we'll need then is simply for you to go through this document, show us the additions or changes that you've made. We will then distribute that to owners. We will put a questionnaire together, a brief questionnaire based on those changes. And if we get more than 75%, then we simply need to round robin. Less than 75%, we still need to go the special general meeting route. But my suggestion is, again, we don't wait until the June AGM. We do it beforehand because a lot of these changes are absolutely critical to how we manage our building.
Yeah.
And Melissa agrees. Mr. yes, sir.
Does it affect short-term letting?
The question is, does it affect short-term letting? Your rules, Steve?
No. I think what we put in the rules is quite a detailed process that you have to follow to enforce fines, okay? We didn't take that short-term letting.
Okay.
We put in the rules the inclusion of slaughtering in your scheme. So you're allowed to slaughter animals in your scheme now. We put in a building deposit for alterations. Those are the major ones.
Hold on. So let's start with that. Let's get you to do just a praising of what you put in and how it changes things. Yeah. We'll distribute it to owners. Owners will give us their comments on each of those changes. We'll distribute those. We'll distribute those comments, etc. And so we'll work that way. We'll work it that way. So thank you for that, Steve. Sorry. Yes, one question here. So the request is, could we put into our rules a procedure for letting out? I'm going to say this. In the questionnaire we send out about the rules, I'm going to make a space for you to put in the kinds of procedure that you feel is not there that might be there. We'll distribute that as well then for general comment. So thank you for that. Yes, Melissa.
When I'm there on holiday and the is broken, am I allowed to go to those people and police it? Who keeps the police?
Well, it's the supervisor and the managing agent that would be responsible for policing the rules. So what you would need to do is to bring it to their attention rather than tackle the tenant yourself.
So the agent
or the agent.
I would like then the agent has to have the numbers and contact numbers available to everybody that in the middle of December when I have a problem at the pool, I want to know somebody will managing agent. Then they must take responsibility. And somebody must be available.
Do we still get a deposit from people?
Okay, so the questions coming to me from all over the place. The first, I'm just going to go left to right. The first question is, do we take a deposit?
When there's short-term letting.
Do we take a deposit on every short-term let? We did make a decision about that 3 AGMs ago. Steve, could you confirm that you have a mechanism in place that when there are short-term lets, deposits are taken?
No, there's nothing in your rules for that.
We made a decision. We made a decision about that, I think 3 AGMs ago. Okay, but I think the decision was different. The decision was the agent had to take the additional deposit, and if there was a claim, it was against the agent. And we have actioned that previously, where in fact we have charged the agent from that deposit, and they've willingly paid from that deposit. So the agents have actioned the deposit rather than the managing agent.
There's no claim against. The claim will be against the owner. And if the owner has an agreement with the letting agent, then he takes it up with the letting agent. So okay, it's that simple. All claims will be against the owner.
But then there must be a clause in the rules that say that the owner willingly accepts that he will pay whatever is imposed upon him.
That we can put in under the letting part, yeah.
All right, can you put that in then for us, Steve?
Yeah.
I must tell you that we previously had claims. We've contacted the agents. The agents have taken the deposits, and they've paid from the deposits the claims for problems with common areas. We haven't had a problem in that regard before. All right, moving on. So now we get to the other question. The other question is this. Steve, between yourself and the supervisor, we need to make sure that there are contactable lists of the agents and people on duty, particularly over the high dense periods such as December and January. So if there is a problem with tenants, the agents are immediately called into play. We have had success with that with some of the agencies in the past. The agencies all have people on emergency standby. They do send their people. And Paddy has made contact with those agencies in the process.
The difficulty is the Airbnb situation.
Yeah, that's what Mr. Allen said. Just explain that.
Well, the guy sees your flat, he books it online and he pitches up. There's no agent.
Well, Rod, you're the Airbnb expert here. What recourse do we have if your Airbnb tenant runs havoc in the building? It's like you guys said, the recourse would be to you, the owner.
Yeah, but we actually have an agent who does all our bookings. So we do it through Airbnb ourselves, but we have an agent who, who does the bookings and manages that for us.
But ultimately, what I think the point that's being made is we're not going to deal with agents in that instance as much as just deal with you as owners. So it's the owner who ultimately is responsible then for dealing with the agent and not either the body corporate or the supervisor.
I think that's probably correct. Our agent's always here, but we're not always here in Umhlanga. So I would obviously contact the agent and tell her to go and sort things out.
Yeah, but it would be your responsibility, not ours. That's the point I'm making.
Correct.
Excellent. One more question here.
There are structures being put on the floors. I would like to know who given permission to put anything on the patio.
Give us an example. Showers.
Vertical gardens.
Vertical
There's
gardens.
A cupboard built in that you can see. It's all visible from the
street.
From the street. So every patio is looking different. Awnings falling down and not. A gazebo built right at the top.
No, that was authorized. If you remember, there was a discussion around patio coverings, and the discussion around patio coverings, which was in terms of the new SANS requirements, South African environmental protection requirements, where we said that we would look at two sets of awnings. One would be the permanent fixture, which is the gazebo fixture. The other would be the sliding fixture, and that owners would then have the opportunity to elect which of those two fixtures they would accept. Do you remember that discussion? Right, okay. Well, that's the reason that discussion took place. As far as showers are concerned, unless there is an application to the body corporate for showers to be applied for, then in fact a shower is an illegal structure, and there have been no applications for showers to be built on patios. So, as long as the fixture is acceptable to the body corporate. So you want to put up so we established about 11, 12 years ago, we established the principle, for example, that it would need to be a fold-away line, not a permanent line structure, et cetera, et cetera. What's on the first floor?
It's the flat next to me. It's like a wooden, I don't know, it looks like a wooden bar unit, and it is revolting.
Built-in cabinet.
You can see it from the pool. It's just
all right. So the process is this. Do me a favor, ladies. Do me a favor. This is important. The process is this. As owners, the moment you see something that you want to query, please just take a photograph of it, put it on the WhatsApp group, and as a group of trustees, we will then simply take it up with the owner. If an owner has not applied for permission to put up an irregular structure, then we will simply either ask for that permission to be considered by the trustees, or alternatively for the structure to be taken down. Yeah, just put it on the WhatsApp group, please. Thank you for that.
Ira, we haven't decided at any stage that I can recall between the rollout awning and
no, we didn't. We said we would give the owners the opportunity to see the one up, to see the others refurbished, the awnings refurbished, and then to make a decision. There were some owners who came back and said that they would prefer the one as opposed to the other. It was roughly about 50%. And we spoke about the fact that at the next AGM, we would then make a decision as owners as to, remember we spoke, I think, also about a 2 or 3 year period during which time we would give owners the opportunity of moving from the one over to the other. And we know we haven't got to that stage yet.
Okay.
All right. So, thank you. This is, first of all, thank you all for being here. I mean, it's absolutely amazing that we've got such great input here today, and it's not ordinary for us to have this input. So thank you all for being here. Just to tell you that we have our insurance reevaluations coming up in 2020. Steve, do you have any idea when in 2020 this is going to happen?
Not off the top of my head, I don't know.
All right, but if we can find out so we can give owners due notice, please remember this. And it goes for me, it goes for people like Warren, I think to some extent yourself, Rod, and certainly you as well, Jerry. Those owners who have put, I don't want to use the term extraordinary, but special capital investment into their units must be aware of the fact that it's going to have to be brought to the attention of the insurance companies when they do the reevaluation, number one. And the additional premiums for those enhancements are going to be for each of those owners' accounts, number two. So we need to make this point very, very clearly that's why, Steve, if you can tell me, for example, they're going to do it in March, we will then tell owners, this is the company that's going to be doing it. Please contact them to make them aware of your special enhancements so that they can cover you for those enhancements. And importantly, so that RESCO can then bill you in the insurance component of the levy for those additional enhancements. So that's critically important because even though we've said it before, it's not being done properly. And so hence owners look at the insurance value of cover on their units and continuously complain about that insurance value, even though they know that they're relating it to their enhancement that they haven't reported to the insurance company. You can't be covered unless they know. It's that simple. And then you can't be covered unless you pay them to cover you for those additional enhancements. Okay, so are there any other items under general anyone wants to raise, ladies and gentlemen?
Thanks to the trustees.
Thanks to the suggestion about the supervisor's flat. We appreciate that, Mr. Allen. Yes, sir.
I'd like to solve this problem because I was involved years. In the past, I was involved in some action from the bully that came to the place.
I have no idea what's going on now, but
that guy that is the supervisor, whatever you call him,
Paddy.
you need to tell about kicks on radio, what's
Okay.
Supervisor must he look after the people, must he have knowledge of construction, must be more of a security, real security person. Another question that I would like to say, if we do some work around the building, we want to employ a professional person, right? Not going to pick up. So then rather I will agree with you to have more of a guy that can sort out some drunk people or bullying. If you never employ professional people to do whatever they can in the field, that's going to be awesome.
So the point that's been made, I think there are 2 points that are critically important. The first is that the principle must be that if we ask for work to be done, and we're going to pay for work to be done, it's always going to be done by a professional. That's the first point. Because I think you're quite right. And a couple of people have actually sent me photographs of things that have been done but not professionally in the past. I think we want to get away from that. If we're paying good money for work to be done, there always has to be a professional that does the work. That's the first point. And therefore, the supervisor doesn't necessarily need to be that professional. What the other point you're making is what the supervisor does. Our selection of a supervisor needs to be based on someone who can keep a tight hold on things like security, on things like the behavior of tenants, and even the behavior of agents in the building and contractors in the building that from time to time can get out of hand. Which gate? The front gate?
Pedestrian gate.
The staff come in, and I was there last week, so I saw that the cleaning staff, they come in and they close the gate. So it's not locked. So anybody can walk in. I don't know if they leave pins in. It happened on numerous occasions.
So Melissa, what's interesting? So what's interesting from what you've said, Melissa just said, for those of you in Durban who might not have heard her, she said that the gate is not even closed sometimes. So I think what's important is that, and I stand open to correction, but there are about 5 or 6 owners that have said, if we activate security in front of the gate, we actually put up a house, not a house, but we put up a little hockey in front of the gate. Our security guard sits in front of the gate. People have to sign in or sign out if they're not owners. If they are owners, they have to have an owner ID card that we issue as trustees. In other words, to professionalize security, whereas at the moment it's not managed properly.
Yeah, but hang on, sorry. We only have a night security.
Okay, so maybe that needs to be changed.
You want to double your levy, security levy? We can
maybe it's consideration rather than spending money on something else.
Look, we've got that guard hut at the ramp starting up the stairs. So
but the argument is it's in the wrong place.
Yeah, but at least you can have a guy sitting there and he can ask people, what are you doing? What's going on?
He walked in with me and he said to me, I'm sorry, I'm not a thief, but I'm coming in to do some work on a flat. I mean, hello. So what am I supposed to say to him?
Any comments other than Melissa and Mervyn? Any comments?
I know, but we need to sort it out now so that we all feel safe and we all want to be.
Security is a major problem in the building. It's a continual problem. And okay, let's not talk about where we are at the moment. But the point I'm wanting to make is that the proposal has been made. Let's shift security to a more visible part of the building and make compliance with the security questions, etc., far more stringent before people are allowed into the building. There is a major concern that the cleaning staff of agents have absolute free-for-all in the building, and that's been a continuous problem. And when we've taken that up with owners, they've quite frankly shrugged their shoulders and said they're not interested in coming to the party and helping to produce it. So there is a problem around that putting security up front would take care of. So
we have certain people that are allowed in the building
because they have a pass.
Agent, because they have a pass to come into the building. They close the gate and nobody else comes in.
Yeah.
I do this flat, end of story. And you've got to have some work.
I think the point that is made as well, though, if we beef up on our supervisor, that problem would naturally be taken care of because it would be the supervisor's responsibility to take care of that problem.
I was there for 10 days. I can tell you now, I did not see Penny for 1 second. I was there for 10 days, in and out of the building. I did not see him.
Yeah, I want to
very sweet, but he doesn't do
often
that.
on phone because I need something.
Was not there for 10 days. I never.
Okay, so again, we have a discussion here on this side about our particular supervisor, and that's why we need to. That's why, as Mervyn said, we need in the first quarter of next year to have made a decision about the replacement, rather than wait too long on it.
But I think make your note.
I'll give you a place to answer on the questionnaire so we can take account of it. Thank you. All right. So from KZN's perspective, any additional points any of you want to make?
No, we're fine, thanks.
Okay.
No.
Something mine issue.
Sorry.
I've never seen the swimming pool as green as it is now. The baby pool's fine, the rest of the pool is green. And normally the pool looks dark.
Yeah.
Not at the moment.
Yeah, I actually said to Katie this morning when I had a swim for the first time yesterday, there's slime at the bottom of the pool. Right from the shallow end, you actually can't walk from shallow end to probably halfway. Wherever you can sort
That's absolutely terrible. Bear in mind we're going into our busiest season now. That will be a priority. Mervyn and I will make sure that that's sorted out tomorrow. Okay. Who swims in the baby pool here?
Yeah.
Me.
Oh, and what did you tell the baby pool that we have to swim in the big pool now, Melissa? All right. All right. Guys, we'll take care of that straight away. Karen, I'm going to ask you this, and I know it's an imposition, but with things like that, where we appoint a contractee, I'm going to just let you know who the contractee is so that you can maybe just keep a steely eye for us, bearing in mind you live in the building.
No problem.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We finished on time. It's been a great 2-hour meeting. I'm sure you'll agree it's important to do and not just to leave it to an AGM every year. So thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, guys. Thank you.